Welcome to week number 2. I'm glad that you're preparing for class next week, and each week I'm going to provide just sort of some mini lectures. They're not intended to take very long, but to give you a feel for some of the basics of what we'll be covering within the next week. It's important that you keep up with these lectures and materials ahead of time in order to take the most advantage of the classroom time that we have. So today we're going to do a little bit of review of some of the basic economic principles from Chapter 1, as well as begin to learn some of the most important issues and concepts from Chapter 2. And you may discover that some of these concepts are things that you have already known and maybe have lived with your whole life. We've just put some names and definitions on top of your own experience. So before we begin, I want to make sure that you really understand that in order to really succeed in this class, your attendance to the material on Blackboard is important. Your participation is important in the classroom when we're on campus. It's also important that you engage with the material online. This is not intended to be a class that is just simply to be done by reading a textbook. You really need to engage with the material, and I encourage you to fully engage with the opportunities that you have. There is coursework on Blackboard. There are assignments and readings and things that you must do in order to succeed in the class. You'll notice that for every chapter, I also put some documents on Blackboard that might help you with your note-taking. Even though the textbook is an online textbook, I encourage you to really think about how you're going to take notes. This is not a class that you're going to do well by just simply coming to class and viewing this as like you're going to a movie. You really need to think about this as just a regular class. You need to take notes, and you are going to need to study. You might have to practice some problems. There are tools in the online textbook that help you with practicing, and I encourage you to take full advantage of everything that is being offered in order to help you succeed. So the fundamental economic problem that we all face, and hopefully by now you've discovered out of Chapter 1, is the reality that we face the issue of scarcity. Scarcity means there's a limited amount of whatever the resource is that we're dealing with, and that scarcity forces us to make some choices. The reality is we can't have it all. We have to make some choices. There is a limited amount of land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. There's a limited amount of things that we have to work with. And if you don't understand that now, hopefully you will very quickly. But the reality is we can't have it all. We have to make some choices. Now, the most fundamental is we face what's called an opportunity cost. So an opportunity cost is the result of our choices. It's essentially the trade-off. It's the value of the next best thing. It's what you would have done. If you didn't make the choice that you did, what would you have done? It's what you gave up in order to do something else. This is the most important concept in really all of economics, and everything stems from this concept that our choices involve a trade-off. We can't have it all, and we have to recognize that when we make a choice for one thing, we give up the opportunity to do something else. So, for example, maybe this afternoon you have some time and you have some choices as to what to do with your time. So for example, you could choose to study, you could choose to sweep the floor, you could choose to do the dishes, you could choose to take a nap, you could choose to do a million things with your time this afternoon. So think about what you would be doing. Well, if you choose to study economics, that means you're not going to be able to do your second choice, and maybe your second best choice would be to take a nap. And so by studying economics, you're not taking a nap. So the opportunity cost of spending your time studying economics is you missed your nap. So when we make our choices, we have to understand that many of our choices that we make, only we can evaluate if the opportunity cost is worth it or not. And there is a difference between what's known as a positive statement and a normative statement. A positive statement is something that deals with what is. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. We can't prove it as true or false. It's just the way it is. So for example, right now you are listening to this video lecture. If you weren't doing that right now, if you would be working, then your opportunity cost of listening to this lecture is your lost work. Okay? So what that means is maybe you gave up a little bit of a paycheck in order to spend this bit of time to listen to this video. Well, the reality is, and there's no opinion about it, it's just if you're going to spend 15 minutes studying in this video, then you're going to give up 15 minutes of your wages. That's not a right or wrong, it's just the way it is. But a normative statement deals with opinions, maybe what ought to be. You can't really prove it as true or false or right or wrong. So I can never tell you that it was a good thing for you to make the choice that you made. Only you can evaluate whether it was a good thing. That's an opinion. That's a normative statement. I might be able to identify the things that you gave up in order to do the choice that you made, but I can't tell you if it was right or wrong. Only you can make that decision. Now, when we make our decisions in economics, we make the realization that we think on the margin. We think incrementally. We don't think of things as all or nothing. We think of changes in increments in the inputs or the quantities that we might consume, the things that we might make, the things that we might do. So for example, have you ever gone to a movie theater and watched the same movie 3 times? Or even just on Netflix, have you watched the same movie 3 times? Well, when you watched it the first time, you didn't sit down and automatically say, okay, this is the first of 3 times that I'm going to watch this movie. You watched it the first time, and then you made a decision. Is it worth it for me to watch it the second time? Is it worth the trade-off? Is it worth the opportunity cost? And if it is, then you watch it the second time. And then you say, is it worth it for me to watch it the third time? And you evaluate your choice, and maybe you watch it the third time. So when we start out, we don't automatically say, oh, I'm going to watch it 3 times. We watch it once, and then twice, and then 3 times. As another example, when my kids were growing up, we often would go through 2 gallons of milk per week. When I did the shopping, I would often get 2 gallons of milk. Now, if you do the math, 2 gallons of milk might mean about 8 gallons of milk per month. Now, if I went to the grocery store on February 1st and purchased 8 gallons of milk, what do you suppose my wife would say? She'd probably think I was crazy. where are we going to put all that milk? Why did you get all 8 gallons at once? We only have enough room for 1 or maybe 2 gallons of milk at a time. The trade-off for getting 8 gallons of milk means I have no more room in my refrigerator for anything else. So we would buy 1 or 2 gallons of milk at a time. We would never go get 8 gallons of milk at a time because we don't have the room for it. So the next concept takes these issues and puts it together and realizes that we have the possibility of producing or doing lots of different things. So a production possibilities frontier or a production possibilities curve essentially describes the possible combinations of things that could be produced or done with the resources that you have available. So for example, let's say that Burger King, I'm going to simplify it and say they only make 2 things, chicken sandwiches and Whoppers. And if they devote all their resources to producing chicken sandwiches, the best they can do is 10 million chicken sandwiches per day. If all resources are over on the chicken side, then they have nothing left over to make Whoppers. So a possible combination is 10 million chicken sandwiches and 0 Whoppers. Or they could divide it up a little bit, maybe have some people working on chicken sandwiches and some people working on Whoppers. So maybe another possibility, they could make 8 million chicken sandwiches and 6 million Whoppers. Might be a possibility. Or they could just make Whoppers. And if they did that, then the most they could make is 12 million Whoppers and 0 chicken sandwiches. Now, if we graph this, you get what's called a production possibilities frontier. So a graph is essentially a map. So each of these 4 combinations represents a point on the frontier. So for example, the first point says 10 million chicken sandwiches and 0 Whoppers. So you'll find the 10 on the chicken sandwich number line and the 0 on the Whopper number line, and you get a point where those 2 sort of intersect each other. You have another point that says 8 million chicken sandwiches and 6 million Whoppers. So you find the 8 on the chicken, you find the 6 on the Whopper, and sort of where the 2 of them intersect each other, you get a point. And then you have 4 million chicken sandwiches and 10 million Whoppers. So again, 4 on the chicken sandwiches, 10 on the Whoppers, where they intersect, and you get a point. When you combine all 4 of them, you get what's known as the production possibilities frontier. So this frontier describes all the possible combinations of things that could be produced, chicken sandwiches and Whoppers, given the resources that Burger King currently has. So really there's an infinite number of possibilities along that frontier. We've just identified 4 of them. Now let's say that Burger King realizes they really just want to do 2 million chicken sandwiches and 4 million Whoppers. It's perfectly possible for them to do that. However, you'll notice they could be doing a lot more of both of them. They have enough resources left over. So really, if they're only going to produce 2 and 4, then they're being inefficient. They're not using up their resources. On the other hand, what if they wanted to make 10 million chicken sandwiches and 8 million Whoppers? Well, they don't have enough resources to produce that many. If they produce 10 million chicken sandwiches, they have nothing left over to make Whoppers. So points outside the frontier means that you can't achieve them. They're unattainable. Now, another important concept that's demonstrated in this graph is the law of increasing opportunity cost. If you look at the trade-offs as you go from one line to the next line, incrementally, thinking on the margin. So you'll notice that when I go from the first line to the second line, I gain 6 million Whoppers, but I lose the opportunity to make 2 million chicken sandwiches. So dividing both sides by 6, every 1 Whopper means that I'm going to lose a third of a chicken sandwich. As I go from 6 to 10 Whoppers, you'll notice I gain 4 Whoppers, but I lose the opportunity to go from 8 to 4, so I lose a chicken sandwich for every Whopper that I gain. And likewise, if I go from 10 Whoppers to 12 Whoppers, I go and gain 2 Whoppers, but I lose the opportunity of producing 4 chicken sandwiches. So dividing both sides by 2, every 1 Whopper that you gain, you lose 2 chicken sandwiches. So you'll notice that as you increase the production of Whoppers, your trade-off gets higher and higher. There will always be an increasing opportunity cost. The more you produce of something, the more you're going to have to trade off in order to get that thing. So if we wanted to produce 10 million chicken sandwiches and 8 million Whoppers, we would have to have what's called economic growth. That means that we would be able to produce greater levels of output really at any combination outside that frontier. So if the frontier shifts outwards, then we have what's called economic growth. How do we get economic growth? We acquire more resources. So maybe Burger King has to build some more kitchen space. Maybe they need to get some more equipment in the kitchen in order to be able to produce that many chicken and Whoppers. Maybe they need to get some more laborers. Somehow they need to get more resources. Or they could have a change in their technology. So for example, maybe they automate some of the things. So for example, I do know right now there is an automatic hamburger flipper. There's also automatic machines that will produce the fries. Maybe acquiring some of those things would allow you to shift the frontier outwards. That's economic growth. So just by way of reviewing, your production possibilities curve represents all the combinations of things that are possible, using up all the resources that you have available. If you're under the curve, you're not using up your resources and you're inefficient. If you are over the curve, you can't really do those things unless you get economic growth. So what you should learn by now is that scarcity forces us to make some choices. The limited amount of resources that we have means we have to make choices. And those choices involve a trade-off. That's our opportunity cost. And we are going to evaluate those choices on the margin. We're going to evaluate those choices incrementally. And the possible outcome of those decisions can be modeled with the production possibilities frontier. In the next chapter, we will begin to take these concepts and apply them to the market system.